Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Thursday, February 7th, 2019. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Well, lots to talk about tonight. First of all, I want to jump over here at grandsolarminimum.com. I should say the grandsolarminimum.com. Ocasio-Cortez gets da boot. Climate scientists shocked about Trump and more. And I wanted to lead off with this part of the show because this is kind of a big deal. I mean, there's some things that Nancy Pelosi did today that's a little surprising, and I'll get into that here in a little bit, but not much. She didn't veer away from her normal evilness. All right, so solar wind speeds coming in tonight at 397.8 kilometers per second with a density of 3.5. And taking a look at our space weather tonight, well, guys, it's just quiet. And why is that? Well, I'll show you here in a minute. We'll take a look at the SDO and what's going on behind the sun. There's that large region of activity behind the sun, folks. This will be interesting as time goes on to see what becomes of this. I'll zoom in on this. Look at the size of this. Very large region of activity there. But again, we've seen this happen over and over again, where these active regions die down once they become Earth-facing because of the weak magnetic connection from the sun to the Earth. But other than that, right now, we are quiet. We are not expecting any kind of... Now, this coronal hole in the center that we're dealing with right now here on the SDO, the 193 angstrom, I should say, we will be dealing with solar storms from that on February 8th. But I wanted to point this out. SPACEWEATHER.com is saying that the solar minimum conditions are in effect. The sun has been without spots for 7 consecutive days, a sign that solar minimum is underway, meaning we are just in the beginning of this minimum. We have not yet peaked. In other words, bottomed out as far as solar activity. And I had an interesting conversation before the show started tonight. Just a thought, but you know, something to look at. But again, indications that we are in a solar minimum, not coming out of one, but we are entering one. Again, SpaceWeather.com thinks so as well. But like I said, we do have a chance for solar activity on possibly on the 7th or the 8th of February. Now they're saying February 9th. And now it looks like they've kind of just dropped it down to just a solar wind event, not a geomagnetics situation. 7 days in a row without sunspots. That puts 2019 at a total of 21 days without spots. Wanted to look at also, really quick, TSI, and bear with me, folks. I wasn't all the way ready tonight. Hope everyone's having a great week. We got a lot to talk about tonight in tonight's Grand Solar Minimum News Update. We'll get with some local weather here in the States, a couple of headline stories on weather across the globe, and some interesting shakeup today in politics. But check out the peak that we got on the TSI here from January 29th. Okay, January 29th came in at 1360.7782. That is around the time that the upper Midwest experienced the polar vortex event beginning in that part. So as TSI peaked up just a little bit, temperatures dropped. So interesting to kind of watch the TSI from back in time and kind of correlate it with things that are happening. And this kind of, I'm just going to go ahead and touch base with what I was thinking before the show tonight. Watching a lot of Joe Bastardi over there at weatherbelt.com. And he's done a really good job of explaining how this polar vortex situation happened. And everybody knows it's because of the sudden stratospheric warming event. But nobody's talking about the reason why that happened. And a lot of it has to do with what's going on in the El Nino 3-4 region, the Indian Ocean, talking about the Madden-Julian oscillation going into phase 8, and the interesting correlation that Joe has connected with these similar polar vortex incidences, and he's even shown us where we've seen these bounce back temperatures as far as the warm-up period. He's compared it to a similar situation such as back in February of 2010. Also, looking at the pattern that we're going into right now, he's comparing to last year of March into April, and now he's saying that what was going on last March into April is going to be happening between now and mid-March. But my point is that he indicated some times of these polar vortexes, and he's lining them up. It seems like these polar vortexes are happening during the solar max, or when the solar max is peaked and is coming down. 2014, 1994, I believe. He was also comparing some stuff from 1985 and into 1974, and then talking about 1962. So it almost feels like that these polar vortexes, and I might be going out on a limb here, but maybe have something to do with a signal of solar activity reaching its peak and bottoming out for a while. And usually we see these signals every 10 years, but thinking back now, I mean, we did have one in February 2010, so they could be a 5-year cycle. Just throwing it out there. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm wondering if these polar vortexes also can be a signal of lower solar activity to happen afterwards. Just a thought. Anyway, moving right along into the show tonight, we'll talk about what's going on here in the United States. First, another round of heavy snow and freezing rain, below average temperatures from the plains to the northeast of the United States. An intensifying low pressure system is expected to bring another round of heavy snow and freezing rain across the central plains through the Great Lakes into the northeast. Road conditions are likely to be deteriorating quite rapidly, even at lower elevation areas, as the storm brings a mix of ice and rain. This low will be pushing northeastward into the Great Lakes region by Thursday, that's tonight, and into the eastern Canada Friday, February 8th, supporting heavy snows for the upper Mississippi Valley, into the upper lakes, and accumulating freezing rain in the lower Great Lakes into the northern New England. And I love weather maps, so thank you, weather.news, or watchers.news, I should say, but this feels like weather.news. I love the weather maps. Anyway, blizzard conditions are possible today on the northwest portion of the storm from the eastern portions of North Dakota, northeast South Dakota into western Minnesota. Blizzard warnings are currently in effect across those areas for the day on Thursday. The wake of a deepening low moving into the Great Lakes, eastern Canada, trailing Arctic front will be pushing from east to the southern plains into the lower mid-Mississippi Valley and Ohio Valley Thursday, and through the eastern seaboard by Friday. In other words, enjoy this little bit of warm-up that we've had, because more colder air is coming back, and there is a sign of a slight bounce back from this weekend, but it's not going to be anywhere as strong as what we have just witnessed this past week. In fact, a lot of us here in the Northeast, we were experiencing temperatures in the low 50s. That's spring-like for us compared to the cold that we've had. And I know folks in Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee also probably had hopes of spring on the way. But unfortunately, this also goes along with listening to what Joe is talking about. It does appear that we are going to see this pattern that's similarly set up in years past. And it does appear that we're going to see another, 15 to 30 days of more cold air to sweep across the Midwest and the East and the Northeast part of the United States. The Northwest right now is getting pounded. We'll leave the link at the website, thegrandsolarminimum.com. Taking a look, recent snows boost Sierras. Now, this article I kind of skimmed over a little bit before we started the show tonight. But this is talking about the drought situation in California and how much water this is going to help as far as with the drought situation. But I saw a stat in here that was, kind of, shocking. Between January 22nd and the 29th, the drought conditions dropped from 92% to 76%. A lot of you remember this drought map during the peak of summer, and it looked very orange and red. They have received feet of snow over the past several days, and they are also continuing to get bombarded with basically atmospheric rivers, which this article addresses as well off of weathernation.com. But I thought this was worth mentioning because all that snow, eventually there'll be the melt, and then we'll be talking about floods and how much of California is going to be in the state of a drought at this point. And also it's going to be interesting to see the way these storms take shape over the rest of this winter, from the southwest all the way to the northeastern part of the United States. Michigan, unfortunately, these folks got hit pretty hard with a ice storm. This is near, I think, Detroit area. Now, this happened back on February 5th, on Tuesday. But it says here an ice storm swept through parts of Michigan late Tuesday, February 5th, into Wednesday, February 6th, leaving nearly 50,000 energy customers without power. The worst affected is Kent County, with more than 25,000 outages, by Muskegon County with over 7,000 in Ottawa. There's a example here. Look at that. Got a little ride the lightning there. Wow. Again, a quarter inch of ice is all it takes. I read somewhere that a quarter inch of ice puts about 300 to 400 pounds of pressure on a power line during a storm like this. The National Weather Service in Detroit warned Tuesday that freezing rain and sleet are likely, with icing of a quarter of an inch possible from midnight through midday Wednesday, which they got that. Travel early Wednesday morning will become hazardous due to slick roads and ice accumulation. Wednesday morning commute was impacted. Again, we will leave the link in the description. And what's unfortunate is we got Winter Storm Lucian right now. Let's go ahead and bring up our map. Satellite imagery. Yes. No. Yes. Let's take a look at our beautiful country here and this wonderful view. We see lots of moisture heading into the northeast right now, and then this was all in the form of snow. Wisconsin, Minnesota. We were talking about how you guys were in a snow drought. Now you've seen your share of snow, as this was a two-parter storm for these guys. Chicago, Illinois, it seemed like you guys got pounded at least 3 times in the last 10 days, talking about brutal temperatures, ice conditions, snowfall, you name it. Winter has not been kind to the Midwest. But 50,000 people without power in Michigan due to the ice storm as winter continues to roll on. And like I said, folks, some of the forecasts, and from what I was seeing earlier, some of the forecasts are now starting to line up with what Joe Bastardi has been talking about. This cold from here until mid-March, and it's going to be cold, severe winter weather, and the GFS is definitely, in my opinion, now agreeing that we are going to see colder temperatures. I'd say there's a little bit more snow in the forecast now for the eastern part, Midwest part of the United States than it was just a couple of days ago. All right, let's take a look here. Major disruption after snowstorm hits Czech Republic. 10 killed as series of avalanches hit the Alps. Unfortunately, all 10 of these people were killed by avalanches in this case. Powerful blizzard hit in the Czech Republic over the weekend, causing major disruptions, leaving approximately 30,000 homes without power on February 3rd. Parts of the country received up to 7.9 inches of new snow and registered wind gusts of 90 miles per hour. The storm downed trees and power lines, closed roads and highways, disrupted flights at Prague-Václav Havel International Airport. The snowstorm has also affected neighboring Germany on February 3rd, forcing organizers to cancel the World Cup skiing race at Garmisch-Partenkirchen. I hope I pronounced that one right. On the same day, firefighters in northern Italy rescued a group of teenagers stuck at the mercy of a strong current of the Cornia River. February 2nd, some 200 people were rescued from their trapped vehicle after hit with heavy snow at Highway 22. And Starman also pointed out to me as well at the beginning of this week that Europe getting just hit once again. Italy pounded with snow. So we've seen lots of winter in Europe this year and the U.S., and it's ramping up, in my opinion. Even some of the UK got in on some of the snow action. Nothing major, but still, we're seeing snow in more areas this winter than we have last year. At least 10 people were killed in a series of avalanches across the Alps on the 2nd and the 3rd. 5 people were killed. One is still missing after several avalanches hit Italy. One person was killed by Italy's Bolzano and one in Lombardy. The skier was killed by an avalanche in France's Savoy region. One person died and another one was injured in an avalanche in Switzerland. One man was killed in Austrian Katharina and one in TiTLE region. So in TiTLE is the area where they had the heavy snow emergencies out there, where they were looking at 9 to 16 feet of snow within a period of 3 to 4 days. Iceland is also enduring dangerous windstorms today with gusts up to 100 miles per hour. Obviously, this was ran on the 5th, so that was, the 5th, that was, what, 2 days ago. Still something to talk about. Winter is in full effect, folks, in the middle of which it should be. It's February. All right, this is what's supposed to happen every February. The last couple of years, though, it hasn't been that way. Or, I'm sorry, the last few years before now, it hasn't been that way. And, of course, I'm referring to 2016 and before. Sure, we've seen our cold spells and cold waves. But let's be honest, 2015, I was in Cleveland, Ohio on December 15th in shorts watching a football game. So we have experienced some unique warmth in the past several years recently. But we've also now have started to notice the increasing cold and the increasing snow. More people are talking about it too. My brother, for instance, I remember when I first started up this channel, he's not really much for conversation on weather. But even now I notice he's talking more about snow and cold than he ever has before. So it's becoming apparent. Leave a link in the description at thegrandsolarminimum.com. And Karangetang lava flow reaches the sea. 5 villages evacuated in Indonesia. Story is on watchers.news. I'm not going to get too deep into this. Bottom line is this remote area of 110 villagers have been evacuated. Just another example of another volcanic activity region that's coming to life. We talk about CO2 levels could continue to increase. And that could be very well just from the fact that the volcano eruptions are going to continue to increase. We'll leave the link in the description here, a little bit of history on the volcano and its activity. Thanks again to Watchers.news for covering most of our headlines tonight belong to Watchers.news, so we appreciate what you guys do over there. It's not easy work. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. I thought it was funny. A lot of people were complaining today about the president, and yesterday, but mainly today. We saw more stories today. The Trump State of the Union speech, what climate change experts say. Top scientists condemn the State of the Union address and say future presidents must control climate change as urgent priority. Lisa Gromelich, the Dean of Environmental College at the University of Washington, attended the State of the Union address as a guest of the Washington Congresswoman, is this right? Pramila Jayapal? All right. I have been doing research on climate change since the 1970s, and I've always seemed very far away in time and space. It was something that was going to happen when people's grandchildren were alive, and that has changed. I don't think the future presidents will find themselves in this position because people are feeling the effects of climate change. I'm not really sure what she said. Bernie Sanders, we all know him. He's talking about it. We've got 12 years to make a difference. What are you going to do about it? That's what Bernie's saying right now. But this should be a huge, and I mean huge, signal to folks out there. Whether or not you agree with Trump, this administration has stood firmly against the notion that climate change is something that man can control or stop. And they also know that this country is already hemorrhaging money from green investments. And this president's smart enough to stop that. And what's interesting is that, you know, the same time we're talking about stopping this country from hemorrhaging money into investments like the green movement here, and I'll give you another example, and I've mentioned this before. Mr. Elon Musk opened up Solar City in Buffalo, New York, and promised over 1,500 to 2,000 jobs by the winter of 2017, February to be exact. And at the time, there was only 435 people working at the plant. So, you know, the state of New York gave this man almost $1 billion to build a factory, to provide great jobs to Buffalonians, to basically possibly earn middle class income potential, and provide, you know, economic strength and stability for the residents of Buffalo. Green energy, solar panels, we're going to build them. And it failed miserably. There was a lot of backdoor deals that Musk began to make once he received the money. Companies that were originally involved with the plan were now taking out, and other companies were brought in. It wasn't disclosed whether or not if it was a price difference or were their material cheaper than the one they originally had. I mean, it's bad enough that people get taxed for carbon in the first place. It's bad enough that the same people that tax us for using these fuels are selling the fuel to us. Okay, that's the crazy part about it. The purpose of the tax is to reduce carbon emissions. If we cut you off in your wallet, you can't afford to drive anymore, so you'll put less carbon emissions into the atmosphere. That's the thinking of these carbon taxes. But it doesn't work that way. Let's move on to the next article here. There she is, our darling freshman Congresswoman, Ocasio-Cortez. This one's great. So there's a two-parter to this. No thank you, but thanks. Okay, so there's a two-parter to this. Here is a look at the Green Deal. All right. First, she wants to rebuild every single building in the U.S., upgrade or replace every building in the U.S. for state-of-the-art energy efficiency. That right there alone is going to be the biggest cost of the entire plan. At least 70% of the increase in cost. Trillions of dollars we're talking for this to happen. She's even suggesting that maybe it's best some buildings just get knocked down and get built back up again. That kind of rebuild. And now this is a 10-year plan, folks. Will end all traditional forms of energy within the next 10 years. Okay. So a lot of times when you're associating these polar vortexes, you have very little wind, if any at all. What happens if we are on 100% solar and wind and we get a polar vortex? And it's a good one. I mean, it's negative 60 degrees all the way down to Chicago. Hey, after what I saw this year, who's to say in 5 more years it doesn't get that bad? All right. But let's just hypothetically talk Minnesota. Who cares? Okay, let's keep it in Minnesota. You've got lack of daylight in the wintertime anyway, so the solar energy is collected a lot less than it would be during a summer day. You have little to zero wind during these polar vortex situations. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna scare you guys. I'm sorry. It has to be done. This is the reality. This is the reality of the situation, and I want to show you guys this. As I'm talking about it, I'm trying to explain to you guys how much output that solar and wind and how useful solar and wind is going to be when you're talking about another one. If we were 10 years from now Okay? If 10 years from now, we are all solar and wind, all right, how do you stay warm during this? And when you see this stat right here, at this moment, 91.75% of Alberta's electricity is being produced by fossil fuels. Wind is at 6.5% capacity and is producing 0.9% generation, while solar is at 0% and producing 0%. Reliable energy is sarcastically put at the bottom. Reliable AB energy. Tweeted this out earlier today. Let that sink in for a minute. How are you going to stay warm during a negative 60-degree wind chill with a negative surface temperature of negative 40? Okay, I guess if we don't have any wind, they can't have a wind chill, I suppose. So I take that back. But still, it's cold. You can't keep your family warm with solar and wind. It's not producing. If you ask me, this new Green Deal is almost a population control thing where it just kills us off without, whoops, we made it legal to kill everybody. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, but I'm trying to set the reality here of what the green energy is doing, and what it's going to do, and what it's not going to do. And that's nothing. It's not going to keep you warm in the winter. It's not going to keep your family warm, okay? People are going to freeze to death with this stupid policy that these crazies on the left are trying to propose. Let's continue on. Plans to ban nuclear energy within 10 years. She says it's unclear if we will be able to decommission every nuclear plant within 10 years, but the plan is to transition off of nuclear and all fossil fuels as soon as possible. This one here is, wow. Build our high-speed rail at a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. That means building across the oceans. That's what she's saying. That's right, folks. Let's build a train track on the ocean. Don't invest in new technology of carbon capture and storage. Just plant trees instead. She says we believe a right way to capture carbon is to plant trees and restore our natural ecosystems. CCUS technology to date has not proven effective. I like to beg to differ. The United States was down 2.7% on their carbon emissions from 2016 all the way through early 2018. So when I hear the words down 2.7%, to me that's effective. That means it cut down on less carbon, and it gives us room to grow on improvement on these carbon capture technologies. But let's move on. Mandate all new jobs to be unionized. That's great. May include a carbon tax. She says we're not ruling out a carbon tax, but a carbon tax would be a tiny part of a new Green Deal. This is the best part. How much will it cost? No estimate of the total cost of implementing the Green Deal is offered by Cortez. Okay. She does provide one estimate of the cost to repair and upgrade infrastructure in the U.S. alone will cost $4.6 trillion at the minimum. Guys, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, $4.6 trillion is the down payment to start the work. Trust and believe that. How will it be paid for? This one is awesome. Absolutely awesome. She says, okay, and she said this while riding on a unicorn. Ocasio-Cortez doesn't provide any insight into how trillions of dollars in spending will be paid for, other than claiming the Federal Reserve can extend credit to power these projects and investments, and new public banks can be created to extend credit. That's right. The Federal Reserve can extend credit to power these projects and investments, and new public banks can be created off of this shitstorm of out of control spending and to create extended credit. The question isn't how are we going to pay for it, but what will we do with our new shared prosperity? Who? Who's we? Who is really going to benefit from this Green Deal? 4.6 trillion minimum. So finally we get an outline of what this woman here wants to do with all fossil fuels. How to accomplish this, because she believes that the world's going to end in 12 years. Guys, don't you think this is a little cheeky here? In 10 years? In 10 years, we know what's going to happen. All right, we know. We know that we're heading into a minimum right now, that there will be a brief maximum period of sunspots before it starts plunging towards the 2030s, where, I believe anyway, that's when we'll see the beginning of the grand solar minimum. And significant cooling will take place at that time as well, on top of what we're going through now until about 2023, 2024, when we get the next series of maximum spots. So it's almost like if they try to imply this in any fashion, you can already see it right now, that they're going to be writing the headlines, "We saved the day. Everyone's broke and poor, and some are dead because they froze to death in the winter. But hey, we cooled the planet. We stopped global warming. Now we can think about ways to warming it back up. Let's start switching to coal again. We'll get more CO2 in the atmosphere." At that point, that would make everything even more worse. At that point, and then, just as this is making headlines. Where's that other story at? I think I posted it. Hang real tight, folks. Give me a second here. The joys of live. This is my, here we go. So I shared it on Grand Solar Minimum Facebook, not the closed group, but the open one. This was practically released a few hours ago, but apparently Nancy Pelosi had done an interview with Politico on Wednesday. And this video, if you guys want to watch it later, it's got
in fact invite me to be
Crazy-O Cortez talking about her plan, and this is where she reveals it and says some really weird things. But here's what Pelosi had to say. When asked about Cortez's Green Deal during the interview with Politico on Wednesday, Pelosi appeared to dismiss Cortez's plan. She said it'll be one of several maybe suggestions that we receive, Pelosi said. The Green Dream, or whatever they call it. Nobody knows what it is, but they're for it, right? That's throwing some pretty big shade, in my opinion. But the only reason why they were talking to her about this is that Nancy Pelosi had announced a new committee for climate change, and we were told that Cortez was going to be in this committee just a few weeks ago. And today, after her announcement with this Green Deal, she was actually revealed the day before that she was not going to be part of this committee. And the reason why I'm mentioning this in correlation to this Green Deal is that even the Democrats are addressing this woman as, whoa, this has gone way too far. This woman has lost her mind. I mean, the fact that she's talking about upgrading which would be great. It'd be great to see every building get a facelift and modernize technology. That would be amazing. But that $4.6 trillion is just a down payment on the beginning of the work. The amount of money that it would cost to do this would make this country go broke. It would take more families out of the middle class ranking and put them in the poverty level. Nobody could afford this Green Deal except for people who probably made more than $250,000 a year, $250,000 a year. Maybe even that might be pushing it. I can't imagine what everything would cost in the future if everything went green. And then You don't even have the supply. Again, one more time. Look what this says. If it wasn't for electricity produced by fossil fuels, 91.75% of the energy that the Canadians received would have not happened. And only 6.5% of that energy needed would have been released because of wind and solar. 6.5%. That's not even running somebody's refrigerator. Sadly to speak, temperatures cold, as much snow as they get, people would die in those conditions. So I think it's important that it's not about politics, it's about logic and common sense. When you hear some of the crazy things that this Cortez lady has said about her Green Deal, and I think Nancy Pelosi, this is her way of backing out of the support for her as a person they want in this committee. Trust me, if this was a great plan, this deal, Pelosi wouldn't have done this. Pelosi saw what was in this plan, and she already knows that she's being critiqued by half of the country. The other half loves her, the other half hates her. And she's even smart enough to realize that this Green Deal that Cortez is proposing is not realistic. It's fantasy land, and she called it Green Dream because Cortez is dreaming if she thinks this is ever going to work, or if lawmakers would even go for this. That's the bottom line, and I don't think they would. And finally tonight, the final article that we had slated up for you guys tonight was "The Planet is No Longer Warming." And I went through this article for a little bit, back and forth, and the interesting parts that I wanted to mention about cooling and warming all date back to when we talk about looking at the century as a whole. We haven't seen a trend in warming. What we see are a lot of people who go back to the 1979 era and start that line from there and show the warming and cooling from that point. But that's kind of not revealing the whole picture. And I think this article does a really good job at showing you, yes, we see fluxes in the graph here, especially if you look right here and around this area right here. It appears, oh, we're skyrocketing. It's warmer than ever. Maybe we had more heat waves. Maybe we had more warmer temperatures, but it's consistent with what we've seen. In fact, if you look here, we see some of these peaks in the past that are higher than what we're seeing right now. Look at this, all the way back in the late 70s. What was going on back then? I mean, we didn't start talking about global warming until, what, 89, 88? We've had warmer temperatures, peak-wise anyway, dating back into the 70s and 60s, and I'm sure that would go back even more. In fact, listening to Tony Heller talking about the temperatures being so hot in the 30s that people were migrating to get away from drought. He was also talking about how NASA is claiming that we're warming and that our fire seasons are longer. Tony Heller did an excellent job at describing and showing the graph where we actually had a lot more wildfires in the early 1900s, and compared to then we have little to zero wildfires compared to what we had back then in the 30s and the 20s. There were some extreme heat waves, and it was also interesting to talk about how Tony Heller pointed out that we continue each year to have less days above 90 degrees on the average. So there's a lot of things that the AGW crowd needs to get a hold of and needs to get a grip on and figure out what they're going to do with their agenda, because it's falling apart, especially when Heller's out there pointing out that we're decreasing in 90-degree average temperatures each year. those heat waves are happening less frequently. Now I know there's parts of the world that are baking right now, Australia, but you have to remember they're talking about the global average, not just a regional section of the world. So just because it's happening in your backyard doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going on around the world. It's all about average temperatures. And there's a lot of proof out there that warming has stopped. And this is where, modestly, they're admitting that warming has stopped. A lot of them would say warming never happened if you look at this. But zoom in just a little bit here, and you can see where that red line does rise a little bit above that black baseline. And then it's starting to head back down again. So there's a slight rise. So these guys here are admitting to the warming, and look how slight that is. I know a lot of you probably can't see that. I apologize. Let's see if I can zoom in on this for you guys a little bit. Right there. That's not a lot. But it's warming nonetheless. We'll give you that. But look where we see the stop. Close to 2014 maybe? Right about 2014. I always said 2016 when the warming has stopped. And if you can see here at the very end, it's about as far as I can zoom it in, but that red line is slightly below the black line, believe it or not, which would indicate a slight cooling trend on the horizon. Starting, anyway. And that's not even the real bones of this. This is the precursor, in my opinion. Let's take a look at some tropical tidbits. Again, guys, all the links to these articles are going to be at the grandsolarminimum.com, our webpage. I'm already put together this format. This was a way to kind of, for maybe some of you to just follow along on your devices. We do have the YouTube video embedded at the top of this program, so you can press play and listen to the broadcast while you're scrolling through, as I am, and checking out the articles for yourself. So if anything you guys want to go back over and have questions about later, maybe address these in the links, and then hit us up on our comment section. Alright, taking a look at tropical tidbits. And the extended forecast, at last check, in my opinion, is starting to line up with some of the things that Bastardi has been saying. The snow that we're getting right now in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest, near the Great Lakes, the Dakotas, that's going to continue. Here's our recent storm. Folks, my apologies here. This was way old. Okay, there we go. So we're starting on Friday. This is part of the last hoorah of our warm-up phase, all right? The East Coast and the Northeast, or this is all going to be rain. Maybe the tail end of this will be snow. Dayton, Ohio. I know. Be ready for the potential of some snow on the back end of this storm tomorrow. Cincinnati, Chillicothe, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, and Clark County had a tornado warning today. And now they're looking at potential for light snow showers the very next day, with temperatures dropping below average. This will be the last of this warm hurrah as we get into that crescendo of cold, as Joe Bastardi has been saying at weatherbell.com. And right now, a couple days after this storm, Lucian is gone, a little bit of calm. Sunday we see Maya getting her act together. This is Winter Storm Maya, is what they're calling it. Once again, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and this is going to affect the Northeast slightly. You guys notice temperatures where it's going to be in the 50s and 60s. That's where the rain line is. Possible some freezing rain in southern Illinois before the next system moves in by the 12th. And the cold air is well in place in the Midwest and in the Northeast, as it starts off at rain at some point for Ohio, but the Northeast at this point, because of the cold air being in place, this will be an all snow event for the entire Northeast. Ohio, this will end for you in snowflakes, and this is where we will start to see winter once again kick in for Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast once again. Now, this is the storm I was talking about. Atmospheric river, folks. This is freaky. Let's focus in on the Southwest just for a little bit, because this is not good. We're talking about the Sierras. with all the snow that's been pumped up there in the last several days, several feet of snow. They're talking about how much water they're having up there. Some of this drought is being relieved completely. But this is about to really intensify. And let me make this clear. California and the Sierras, the Southwest, they usually rely on their water supply being replenished by maybe a handful of these storms, not back to back like these. And check out this atmospheric river starting on the 13th of February. Moisture inundating California, the Sierras. You got to know that's snow, guys. That red and yellow is snow in the upper elevations. And this just pours into Thursday. And then Washington and Oregon, you're going to get more snow again. Look at all the moisture. I mean, the colors in the Sierras indicate to me that we're going to see anywhere from 10 to 20 feet of snow if these rates are right, and just somewhere in 3 to 4 days. And it doesn't stop, especially in Northern California. February 17th, and finally starting to taper off by the 18th of February. And I might be exaggerating on the 10 to 20, but I wouldn't be surprised they got 15 feet of snow in the Sierras from this event. So the Northwest and the Southwest, West Coast mainly, is going to see its share of winter weather. But like I said, after we get past the 13th, looking at the Midwest, here we are on the 15th. There's a little mini precursor snowstorm hitting the Ohio Valley, rain to the south. Freezing rain event possibility on the 16th. Changing over to rain, that might be their last rain event on the 17th. Another all snow event for northeastern part of the country, because the cold air is going to stay in place in the northern plains, the upper Great Lakes, and the northeast. Ohio, it's really up and down right now. You guys are 50-50. The Ohio Valley, Indiana, Illinois, you guys are 50-50 on where the temperatures will stand. You're going to be just above freezing or just below when these storms hit. So it's on that fine line where it could shift north, it could shift south. So right now, anything goes for the Ohio Valley and Indiana. But as we go into the late part of February, the 21st, lots of moisture being poured in through the south, almost atmospheric river-like, and that puts in another major low-pressure system. As we see, and this is what Joe Bastardi was talking about. I'm going to stop it right here. He showed us this today in his broadcast. You got one storm moving out, and you got one moving in. And this is what he's saying is going to be the pattern for the rest of this month, after mid-February into mid-March. One big system, another one moving in. This will make its way across, it'll move out, another one will bring in. So this is where Joe has been talking about this for a few days now. He's making a lot of correlations between the Madden-Julian oscillation heading into phase 8, reflecting back on past polar vortex events, and showing the bounce back temperatures. The pattern that we're seeing right now is what we were going through last March into April. So if you want to do a comparison to that, that's another thing you can look at. But so far, from everything that I've heard at weatherbell.com, Joe Bastardi has not misled anybody at this point at all. Especially since I probably paid more attention to that channel the last month or so. I always used to catch it when I can, but there was a couple broadcasts that I heard him do, and he's caught my attention since. And it's really about the main thing I'm really fascinated with is the correlation with the Madden-Julian oscillation being into phase 8 and showing these exact same signals in different years. So I'll get more information on that. But February looks to be active, and what I was saying earlier is that yesterday or the day before, the GFS wasn't in line with this. In fact, the GFS was still showing more rain events in the northeast and the east. And now we're starting to see more snow in the northeast, more ice and snow in the Midwest, and the upper Great Lakes and the upper northern plains is going to see plenty of snow, but also the Northwest, you're going to get your share as well. And those cold temperatures, guys, Texas is getting snow and sleet. Forgot to mention that. Insane. traces, but still, it's cold enough. Dallas, Fort Worth, come on. Again, it's too close to call for the Ohio Valley. I think it's a 50-50 on the rain, snow, ice. But in the Northeast, definitely snow. A lot more snow coming our way past the 15th. A lot more snow in the Great Lakes, upper Midwest, and the Northern Plains, and the Northwest. The South, you're just going to continue to get drenched with moisture from the Gulf and the Pacific, the Eastern Pacific, that is. In fact, everything moisture-wise mostly comes. We get a couple of systems from the Gulf, and that's recent. And after we get past mid-February, all the moisture comes in from the western part of the country, the Eastern Pacific, I should say. So, interesting shift here. We'll keep our eyes on what's going on. Let's take a look at some ice totals. Still growing. Doing way better than we did last year. We're crushing records compared to last year. Arctic ice is stronger than it's been in a long time. About 7 years, 8 years. Everything's in line. Everything looks good. Mari, what's going on? How's people's the El Nono is at 612 above baseline, so we are just above El Nino threshold. The North Atlantic has plummeted towards baseline. And there's a look at your sea surface temperatures. Let's zoom in. Look at that lovely 25 degrees Celsius near Hawaii. Guys, that's supposed to be around 28 degrees Celsius during an El Nino event.
Hey, Jake.
Hey, Mari.
How you doing?
I'm all right.
You sound fantastic tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
I was going to make a Ron Burgundy comment, and I just decided not to. I'm a wise ass, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to GSM. Good to see some new faces in the chat. Let's see. Grant's in the chat, right? And he said that there's some kind of tweet going around about Cortez. And the question is, what if Sacha Baron Cohen is actually Cortez just trolling America? That made me laugh.
I have to agree. There could be a Ripley's Believe It or Not film crew following her around as well. So Grant may not be far off.
Cheryl says, hook up a windmill to a Crazio's mouth. Unlimited energy. You guys crack me up. I mean, it's such a pleasure in the chat.
We already came up with better solutions.
I mean, it's never ending. So much good stuff, Jake. I don't even know where to start. Lolo says they'd love to see some global warming. It's -20 there, blowing snow.
Ooh.
What happened to your children will never see snow? Snow will be a distant memory. Wasn't the East Coast supposed to be underwater?
Was this guy? What's Hansen? Is that the guy with the global warming stuff? Michael Manns and what's the other guy? James Hansen.
Well, that's a Al Gore thing,
okay.
Isn't the what?
I think back in 2000.
Mann?
I think 2008. He announced that we'd be Arctic free, ice free in the Arctic in 10 years.
And then let's see if there's any other.
He was horribly wrong, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Stronger ice growth in the last several years
makes for great memes.
Sure, why
Let's
not?
Just
you like making memes.
Lady T Survival gave a good suggestion to our viewers. If they're not getting notifications on the channel, unclick the bell and then re-click it. Sometimes it resets it if you're not getting the notifications, even though you're subscribed to it, because people are complaining no notification.
Or if you really love us, just set an alarm on your phone.
Well,
somebody does that. There was somebody that did that in the chat. They said that they just set their alarm on their phone.
I have added a notification system, like a starter system. So if you're like using Chrome, you can click the big red bell in the lower left-hand corner of our website. And when we publish posts, you'll get a little notification that'll pop up on your screen. So I know it works pretty good on desktops. It works in Safari as well. As for the cell phones, I think it works on Android. For me to get it to work on the iPhone, I have to pay like $99. Not really into doing that right now. So eventually we'll try to get that going. But notifications are up and running. So we're starting to build these backup systems for when all this social media is failing us. Well, social media fails us pretty much on the daily,
Right.
Jake. So whether it be Facebook, YouTube, anywhere, our website is like the safe haven for GSM stuff. So you'll know where to go.
Yeah. That's why we decided to put the links and everything on the website, because if people know about the website already that are subscribed to the YouTube channel, which we have thousands upon thousands of followers, thank you very much for your support too. But those people that know where our website is, they don't have to worry about missing a show, because Mari is going to leave that format that she has here for all of our shows from now on. So you can go back, and like I said, at the very top, each video will be here, and you can play the video as you go along with me and the articles, and up and down throughout the same tools that I use, the SPACEWEATHER page, the TSI, everything. And then if you haven't registered through the site, once you do that, you can log in and be a part of the social part of the page, which is basically like Facebook. You'll have your own profile. You'll leave messages on your wall. You'll friend people that are already registered on the website. The goal is to develop this mega community for like-minded people who believe in climate change is happening, but it's natural cycles. It's grand solar minimum related. It's related to ENSO cycles. There's so many factors that go towards warming and cooling. And the scary part about this whole topic, the reason why we do this is because there's so much disinformation out there. There's so much, and right now it's worse than ever. And the disinformation that's coming from the left about the climate is going to get people killed. And I think it's important that, we can come out and report the news, show you guys, point out how even the Democrats have a heart pulse at once in a while. Pelosi is not going to allow Cortez to be on that climate change committee after all, when it was said that she was. And I love your title, Mari. It's not easy being green. It's not easy being green.
It's not easy being green. See, and then you got the circle down here. You got Cortez crying. And then I found like a little image that says
Lord.
Tears of a Clown.
That's going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you for tuning into the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Please remember to like and share. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter. But don't forget about our website, thegrandsolarminimum.com. All the articles and everything we did tonight's show will be there, as well as in the future. Guys, take care. We will talk soon.